Hi guys, this is Mrs. Caruso's guide to the midterm election. And I know this is probably not the most fascinating thing that you'd prefer to watch on YouTube, but you are being impacted by it, am I right? Like, your social media feed has probably been inundated with political advertisements, and certainly there are signs everywhere and commercials on television, and we're probably all kind of ready for this to be over with. And that's me too, quite honestly. But guys, what's happening is important, and so I thought I would post a video so that you kind of understand the significance of the midterm election and what exactly it's all about. So with no further ado, let's get started. The term midterm elections, first of all, refers to the middle of a presidential term. So President Trump was elected in 2016. According to the Constitution, the president serves a 4-year term. Therefore, 2018 marks a midterm election. Generally, this election gets a lot of attention because there are a large number of seats, both in the U.S. Senate and in the House of Representatives, that are up for re-election at the midterm. A third of the U.S. Senate seats and all of the House of Representatives are up for re-election. And when the election is over, whichever party, Democrat or Republican, controls each House and Congress, that's going to have a huge impact on whether the president can get the things done that he would want to do, because the Constitution has designed the system such that the executive branch has to work with the legislative branch in order for legislation to move forward. Now, in your state and in my state, there are many other important decisions that are being made on the midterm ballot, but I do want to start with where everybody's talking, and that's the federal level. That's the U.S. Senate and the House of Representatives. So guys, President Trump was elected in 2016, and with him, the Republicans swept in and took a majority in the House of Representatives along with the Senate. So they controlled both the executive branch and the legislative branch for the last 2 years. You can see in the House that they had a larger majority, right? And actually these numbers are a little bit off now. It's the best graphic I could find for you that had both. But there are 6 vacancies in the House, so the numbers are just a little bit different. And then the Senate, this is true to this day, where we have 49 Democrats and the Republicans enjoy the most narrow of majorities, 51. Now, midterm elections are really important because they're going to determine the makeup of the Congress that the president has to work with for the second half of his term in office. Whoever wins the majority in each one of those houses of Congress determines what laws can be considered and what issues can be brought before committees. So regardless of what the president wants to see done, if the opposing party controls one or both of the houses in Congress, it becomes really difficult for him to move his agenda forward. The majority political party, whoever wins in each house, chooses their leadership. So the new Speaker of the House of Representatives could be Nancy Pelosi if the Democrat Party takes power, if they win the majority in the House. Or we know it won't be Paul Ryan, because Paul Ryan has said that he's going to step down, but some other Republican would serve as the Speaker of the House if the Republicans hang on to the majority of the seats in the House. Same process in the Senate, except the leader there is called the Majority Leader. The reason that that's important is that whoever becomes the leader, the Speaker or the leader, they set the agenda for those houses. They decide what bills are going to be considered. They decide who the chairmen are of each committee, and clearly those committee chairmen are all of the same political party. So they have lots and lots of power to control how issues move forward over the next 2 years. Now, one important check that we have in our Constitution is that it requires the president to sign off on any bills passed by Congress in order for those to become a law. So if he disapproves of what they've passed through Congress in the future, he can veto that bill. So let's say that the opposing party were to gain control of both houses and pass legislation that he didn't think was appropriate, or the Republicans at large in the country disagree with. He has the opportunity to veto that legislation. However, it then goes back up to Capitol Hill, and if 2/3 of both houses, if they can gather enough support and they have 2/3 of both houses that will vote for that legislation, it will become a law. Guys, I'll just tell you right now, things are so close and we're so divided that that is not going to happen. We are not going to see those kind of, number one, we're not going to see those kind of majorities occurring. They're not going to win by that much, either party, and it is highly unlikely that anything that was sent back, that they would gain enough support from the other party to reach the 2/3 threshold. So, all right. Many people are also particularly focused on the Senate races, guys, because the Senate has both the authority and the responsibility, according to the Constitution, for approving or rejecting Supreme Court nominees. That's in Article 2, Section 2, Clause 2. Now, here's the real problem. The Supreme Court has become something that our founders never intended it to be. It has more power than it was ever designed to have, and people are using the court to actually change policy and law in the United States. You've probably heard the term legislating from the bench. Well, without getting into all of that, that is exactly what's happening. So the Supreme Court has been moving over into areas where they are actually creating law instead of simply interpreting the Constitution. So folks that want to get things done and they can't move it through Congress because the representatives of the people would never approve these things, they have been able to be successful in some cases by bringing these cases to the Supreme Court for a decision. So that, and the other issue is, okay, the Supreme Court has power it's really not supposed to have, and we are so divided as a nation right now on issues that are likely going to come before the court for a decision, like abortion and religious freedom issues. So therefore, people are very tuned in. They are very concerned with the balance of power on the Supreme Court. And you combine that with the fact that President Trump has had an unprecedented ability to nominate justices to the Supreme Court. It's unusual for a president to nominate anybody. And President Trump in his first 2 years has already nominated, he's had the opportunity because of vacancies on the court to nominate 2 Supreme Court justices and have them approved. And it is possible that he could have 1 or 2 more during his presidency. So therefore, again, because the Senate could block him or the Senate could approve his nominees, people are putting a lot, they're just pouring a lot into these Senate races because it's so important to them how the Senate falls out. All right, with that said, the Senate has 100 members. So just to be clear, there are 50 states. According to the Constitution, every state has 2 senators. So that gives us 100 senators. Those guys and gals serve 6-year terms. To avoid the chaos of having all of them running at once, the senators are divided into thirds. So a third are up for re-election every 2 years. They rotate through that cycle. This year, we have 35 senators up for re-election. Clearly, in order to have a simple majority, they would need 51 seats. In order to get everything done that they would want, without having to fear what's called a filibuster, or a debate forever move by the minority party, they would have to have 60 votes. Here's how that works. Most legislation in the Senate still only requires 51 votes to get passed. But guys, the Senate was designed by our founders to be what's called a deliberative body. Like, it's meant to debate, to talk things through, to kind of be a cooling off place. Like if something moves through the House really quickly and gets its 51 votes, once it gets here, it can be passed by 51 votes, but it takes 60 votes to come to what's called cloture. That means we're going to close debate. So, if the minority party doesn't like it, and they don't want to even have it voted on, then they just don't allow debate to end, and that's called filibustering. So with 41, do y'all understand what I'm saying? If it requires 60 votes to come to cloture, and we have 100 people in the Senate, then if 41 of them that are in the minority party say we're not going to vote for cloture, then that means you can't ever even vote on the issue. It never gets to the final vote because they won't stop the debate. So that's what we've been experiencing more and more in recent years. People have been using the filibuster more as a weapon to keep the other party from advancing their agenda. Because of this gridlock, in recent years, the Democrat Party actually invoked what they called the nuclear option, and at least in the circumstance of presidential nominees during the Obama administration, they said we're going to move the cloture threshold to 51 votes. If we have a simple majority of 51, we're going to be able to move a nominee forward. So guys, that's exactly what happened during the Obama years, and that is also what happened with Justice Kavanaugh. They only had to reach the threshold of 51 votes to get cloture on that issue, but for most things, they have to get to 60. All right, so I hope that's clear and didn't confuse you. Now, right now, this graphic that I'm using is from the Fox News midterm election headquarters website. And guys, there are many others from different sources. I just thought this one was very easy to read and pretty clear. So you can use Real Clear Politics or others. You're going to have about the same information. So right now, 35 senators are up for re-election, but most experts think there are really only 5 seats that could go either way. So looking at the polling numbers and how these guys are doing, they're saying, we really think that a lot of them lean or are likely Republican or lean likely Democrat. There's only about 5 where we see it could go either way. Those are called toss-ups. That comes from the idea that you like toss a coin in the air and we just don't know. Okay, so it could go either way. The Democrats, if we look at our graphic here, the Democrats, there are 23 that are not up for re-election. Then we have 19 seats likely Democrat and 3 that lean Democrat. When you combine all that, you have 45 seats that are likely going to go Democrat. And for the Republicans, same thing, 42 are not up for re-election. We have 5 likely and 3 lean. So that gives the Republicans 50. But guys, still, even these pink leans and these light blue lean Democrat, those are not done deals. So this is interesting stuff to watch on Tuesday night as results come in, how things move about. But if that goes as they predict, then again, these yellows, these 5 toss-ups are what are going to decide the balance of power in the Senate. So the Republicans have an easier road, clearly. It looks like they only need to win 1 of the toss-ups to hold on to the majority that they've had, where the Democrats would have to win all 5 just to get to a 50-50 balance in the Senate. And of course, that begs the question, well, if there's a 50-50 balance, who's actually in charge? Well, technically, at 50-50, the Republicans are still the majority party, only because, according to the Constitution, again, the president of the Senate is the vice president of the United States. So if they're evenly divided, the vice president comes in and he has to make the deciding vote, and he's done that several times already. So technically, since the vice president's a Republican, if it were a 50-50 division in the Senate, the Republicans would have the majority vote. As far as chairmanships and things, traditionally, what they've done in that case is they've had co-chairmen of the various committees, etc. All right, the Senate toss-ups, those 5 races that they're watching so closely and that you'll want to have your ear tuned for on Tuesday night would be in Arizona. In Arizona, guys, it's interesting. The current senator was Jeff Flake. He's a Republican. He was on the Judiciary Committee that was part of the confirmation hearings for Justice Kavanaugh. He had a very controversial role on that committee. Anyway, he has stepped down, and so these 2 ladies are vying for his seat. So it'll either be Martha McSally, the Republican, or Kristen Sinema, the Democrat. In Indiana, you have an uphill battle for Mike Braun, who's a Republican, because he's trying to unseat what's called an incumbent. So guys, if somebody's an incumbent, it means they currently have the seat. And that person always has an advantage. Sometimes just because their name is more recognizable and they have a record to run on and that kind of thing. So it's a difficult road. And when we see a sitting senator unseated, that has a little more meaning. It tells us something serious is going on. So again, we have a race that's too close to call, with Mike Braun challenging the incumbent, Senator Donnelly. Same thing in Missouri, where Josh Hawley, a Republican, is challenging sitting Senator Claire McCaskill. Also in Nevada, we have kind of the opposite situation. You have a Republican incumbent, Dean Heller, who's being challenged by Jackie Rosen, a Democrat, and it's too close to call. And then finally, guys, Not surprisingly, Florida is often a decision state. So we are once again right in the crosshairs, and you're going to be hearing a lot about Florida on Tuesday night if you're listening to election results, because the outcome here is really important. We have our, I said former, but he is our current governor, Rick Scott, who is the Republican, who is kind of that uphill battle to unseat Senator Bill Nelson, the Democrat. In addition, there's some other races that they're watching just because they call them bellwethers. I'm using all these terms that my students may not know, but a bellwether means it tells us something about how the whole country is thinking. So it's really interesting that in a state like Texas that's traditionally heavily Republican, we have Senator Ted Cruz, who's in a hotter race than maybe people thought he should be, with a guy named Beto O'Rourke, because Beto O'Rourke is kind of the polar opposite of Ted Cruz. He has a lot of progressive ideas, very liberal ideas, and so people are watching that race closely to kind of see what are Texans thinking and what might that indicate about the rest of the country. So that's an interesting race to follow as well. Now we move over to the House. Guys, the House of Representatives has 435 members. They are all up for re-election every 2 years, so right now. At the top of the graphic, you see where we are as it stands today. 193 Democrats, 236 Republicans, 6 vacancies. So they enjoy, again, a slight majority in the House. So then below it, you see what they're expecting to happen. And traditionally, guys, what does happen is, with very rare exception, the House of Representatives usually flips over to the opposing party of the president. So that is generally what happens. So if things go as they traditionally would, we would expect for the Democrats to take control of the House of Representatives. So not surprisingly, when we look at the graphic again and we see what the experts are predicting, they say there are 193 likely Democrat, 14 that are leaning, that's your light blue, versus 166 likely Republican and 33 leaning. So it looks like 207 seats are safe for Democrats and Republicans have 199 safe seats. Guys, again, that kind of goes with what we're traditionally used to seeing. In order to get the majority in the House, since there's 435 total seats, you have to get 218. That's why this little graphic says 218 needed to win, right? That's what you have to have that simple majority to get things done in the House. What you want is a little more than that so that you're not always stressed out about 1 or 2 people flip-flopping, okay? But anyhow, 218 is what's needed to actually win. Down below the graphic are these little ovals that tell us who are these light blue races. Who are these people where it's too close to call right now? 14 that lean Democrat, 33 that lean Republican, and 29 toss-ups. So those are names of districts like Kansas, 2nd District, or Florida, 27th District. When we look at that, we see that of the 29 toss-ups, the Republicans need to win 19 of them. They have a harder road to get to the majority. The Democrats need to win 11 to have the majority. And in Florida, one of the hottest contested seats is actually in District 7. Some of you may live in District 7. It's just north of Orlando. It encompasses parts of Sanford. And we have a Republican, Mike Miller, who is seeking to unseat an incumbent Democrat Representative Stephanie Murphy. Right now it is an absolute dead heat. There are 2 other races around the country that experts say, I mean there are many, but there are 2 other that they say, you know, let's watch these and early on see how these goes, and they'll tell us a lot again about what the nation is thinking. So in Kentucky, District 6 has Representative Andy Barr, who's a Republican, and he's being challenged by a Democrat, Amy McGrath. So how will that pan out? Same thing in Georgia, District 7. Again, because what traditionally happens is that Democrats sweep in and take seats. So we want to see, is that what happens in a couple of these very key places? In Georgia, District 7, Representative Karen Handel is being opposed by a Democrat, Lucy McBath. So watching to see, you know, what happens in Georgia 7. And of course, here in Florida, guys, we have a huge governor's race. Again, much like Cruz and O'Rourke, we have two candidates who are polar opposite. It's interesting to me that in the primaries, both parties chose not to support moderate or middle-of-the-road candidates. So Republicans chose in the primaries, which guy do we want to run as a Republican for governor? And the Democrats had to choose, who do we want to run for governor? Republicans chose Ron DeSantis. He's known for very conservative constitutionalist positions. Democrats chose Andrew Gillum. He's known for advocating very progressive, even outright socialist policies. So the two candidates are representing a very clear clash of ideas, and the outcome is really important for the future of our state and for understanding where we are, where do we stand as voters in the state, what are we thinking as Floridians. And just so that you know, right now polls show a statistical tie. What that means is it's too close to call, but poll after poll does have Gillum with a slight lead. So what that means is, okay, the poll could be wrong, so it's within what's called the margin of error. So they won't say it is Gillum, but over and over again, between 1 and 6 points, Andrew Gillum is up over Ron DeSantis. And in Florida's ballot, here in our state, we have 12 amendments to our state constitution, and they're really important. So those things they're a big part of your ballot. It's almost 2 pages worth of our ballot that our voters are being asked to consider. And guys, this is really tough stuff because they're difficult to understand. A lot of them are deceptively worded, and each one does require 60% approval by the voters. So it's a difficult threshold to meet to get to 60, but it's lower than it used to be. Okay, I'm not going to get into great detail on the amendments here, but if you or your parents want my thoughts on the amendments, I posted a pretty good long explanatory post on my Facebook page, so you can find it there. I did give you a hint about how I might fall on this. So guys, if you're students in my class, you know we've talked about what a direct democracy is as opposed to a representative republic. So when we ask voters to make decisions on these things that will become law, is that more of a direct democracy, or are we operating more like a representative republic at that point? Finally, on your ballot, there are lots of very important local races. Everything on mine, from like mosquito control board to school issues, all kinds of things. In my opinion, if we governed as our founders intended, it would be these local races that would actually be our biggest concern, because that's where the power would be, in local self-government. That's what they intended. But instead, we're all focused on Washington, D.C. And guys, right now, we have to be, because we've handed over so much control to the federal government over the years that we now have to be concerned and involved to try to control what they might do to us next. The long-term goal is to elect strict constitutionalists to go and serve in our U.S. House and our U.S. Senate, folks who will work to dismantle the bloated federal government and return control to the states respectively, or to the people, which is what Article 10 in our U.S. constitutional amendments says should happen in the first place. I'm going to leave it there. Go vote if you're old enough to do so. If not, encourage your parents to do so, and be in touch if you have any questions.